everyone. This is Daniel Lev versus Alex P. Yep, Term 4, 2018, played on October 13th. Let's just get into it. Okay, so Daniel played C4, the English opening. Knight f6, knight c3, g6, we have a King's Indian defense. Knight f3, that's fine. Bishop g7, d4. D6, bishop g5. Yeah, I mean, I'd prefer just straight out e4. Just make a big center and just go into the main King's Indian lines. But these bishop g5 lines, I don't really know what to think about them. Like, my gut instinct is that the bishop is misplaced here because in a lot of King's Indian lines, Black likes to expand on the king side by charging his h-pawn, f-pawn, and g-pawn up eventually and going on a pawn storm on the king side, and the bishop's just a target for those pawns. However, if white isn't intending to close the center up, then putting the bishop here is perfectly fine. I think it's a fine move. I think it's not a problem. Whether it's good or bad depends on how white plays, pretty much. Knight bd7, yeah, it's okay. e4, yeah, so far so good. Castles, bishop takes f6. Now, just simply taking the knight is not a good idea. What you should do is wait for black to play h6 and waste that move on h6, and then you take the knight. Just taking the knight straight away actually helps black, because you take the knight and he takes back with his knight, which gets out of the way of his bishop, and all you've done is wasted a move, and you've actually helped black get his knight to where it wants to be, releasing his bishop at the same time. What I'd prefer is a move like queen d2 here. Queen d2 is a bit annoying for black to deal with, because with the queen and bishop both on this diagonal, it means black can't play h6 to chase bishop away. So queen d2 is quite nice, and it keeps black guessing as to whether you might be castling queenside or not. Other moves, I mean, I'm guessing this is still book. In fact, we can just look at it. Yeah, we're still in book, and some of the moves that are favored here are h3. H3 is an interesting idea, keeping knights out at g4. Maybe the idea is to let black play h6 and then drop the bishop back to e3. And when the bishop drops back to e3, you don't want the knight immediately jumping into g4 and attacking the bishop. So h3 makes a lot of sense on that part. Queen d2 is also a book move, and bishop e2 just simply developing the bishop. But yeah, I can't recommend taking the knight. I think if you are going to take this knight, you should wait until your opponent wastes a move with h6 first. Okay, so we took, the knight took back, and then bishop d3. Yeah, I mean, it develops the bishop. It can kind of get in the way of the queen defending your d-pawn sometimes, which you got to be careful of. You don't really want bishops jumping into g4, pinning this knight, and then some sort of discovered attack on this pawn happening later on. The reason why that's a problem is because I can imagine situations where this knight goes to h5 and threatens to jump into f4, and going to h5, threatening to jump into f4, makes this bishop uncomfortable and attacks this g-pawn. At the same time, well, it releases this bishop onto this pawn, and that combined with maybe a bishop g4, and you might find these pawns are hard to defend. In a lot of these lines, the bishop's actually better placed on e2 than on d3. The queen is still defending d4, and this sort of pin here does nothing when you've got the bishop guarding it. And also, often the bishop sitting on d3, let's go back, this pawn is going to end up on this square here a lot of the time, and you're going to end up with a couple of pawns blockading each other on e5 and e4, and this bishop's just running into nothing. Whereas if it sits here, it actually can pop out and do things. So d3, the bishop's often misplaced there. It looks natural and normal, but it really isn't. I mean, of course, it'll be great if you could manage to get e5 in, but black shouldn't let that happen. Okay, so bishop d3 was played. Bishop g4. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. I mean, does it stop this? Yeah, it probably does. E5 is a bit annoying having to deal with it. I don't think it's an actual issue here, because takes, knight moves, that pawn might be overextended. H3 was played. Yeah, that looks okay. Takes, queen takes, and then knight d7 was played, and that just releases the bishop attacking this pawn and prepares to play moves like e5 and f5. F5 in particular can be a bit annoying with the with the queen on the same line as the rook. But yeah, the immediate threat is just stealing this pawn, which white has to deal with. White has to play a move like d5, it maybe, or maybe drop the knight back to e2, or maybe throw the queen onto e3. Wait, is there a problem with knight e2? Yeah, knight e2 is not good because this pawn is pinned to the b pawn, so it actually allows a move like c5 to be played. Okay, but yeah, I don't see there's much wrong. There's not too much wrong with d5, except that it opens up the e5 square. Queen e3 might be best here. Just move the queen over here to defend this pawn. It's either way, it's a bit annoying for white. The biggest problem is this bishop's on d3. If this bishop was on e2, you could probably just play rook e1 and defend the pawn, or castle queenside and defend the pawn. But because the bishop's on d3, it's interfering with this line. This pawn has suddenly become much harder to defend. So yeah. On the other hand, if the bishop wasn't on d3, this queen wouldn't be on f3. But the queen doesn't want to be on f3 because this pawn is going to march up and try and trade off and get the rook attacking the queen. Yeah. Okay, white castled. Okay, that just throws away a pawn. Just that's the end of the d pawn. That's quite a large blunder. This knight move back here is quite sneaky with a discovered attack on this pawn, and white's just lost the pawn. Bishop takes d4. And now white's played rook a b1. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe putting the rook on c1 is better, or maybe rook on d1. But rook on b1. I mean, the only reason you do this is if you're planning on charging this pawn up the board, but you can't just charge this pawn up the board because it leaves the knight undefended. So I'm not really sure why the rook wants to sit on b1. C1, I think, is a little bit better because it defends the knight and allows this pawn to charge up the board. Alternatively, you could put this rook on c1 with the idea of putting this rook on b1 and then marching the pawn on the board. But either way, you need this knight defended somehow. Maybe this bishop should just drop back. e2, and it kind of gets in the way of the queen. Maybe c2. The bishop could drop back to c2, and the queen's defending the knight, and then you can start looking to play b4 and expanding on the queen side. But rook b1 straight away, I don't know, it depends on what the follow-up move is. Okay, this bishop dropped all the way back to g7. That's a nice safe move. Black probably should have considered this, just taking the knight and giving white double isolated pawns, and just following up with b6. And you've got this permanent square on c5 for the knight forever, pretty much. And these doubled isolated pawns are just a problem, and this isolated pawn's a problem. Black just has a perfectly safe and amazing position. And black could probably play e5, the knight sits in c5, and then go f5, and then slowly expand on the king side. So I really think the bishop should have ripped off the knight. It is a really nice piece. I can understand why black didn't want to swap it. So he's run back to g7 again, playing nice and safe. And now what has white done? Oh no, b4. No, it just throws away the knight. That pretty much just ends the game right there. To be honest, the game's now over. Bishop takes knight. End of game. Like I was saying before, moves like bishop c2 to defend the knight with the queen, or rook fc1 to defend the knight with the rook, and then march this pawn up the board. These things are fine, but obviously this is just losing the game immediately. And yeah, Alex isn't going to lose it from here. He's not going to stuff this up. b5, bishop back to g7. just run away, play nice and safe. I mean, at this point, black is a whole piece up. It's worth considering just playing knight here to fork the queen and bishop, and then just take the bishop, and then just run the bishop away afterwards. But I mean, on the other hand, you could argue that this knight is far superior to this bishop, and you shouldn't be trading. The knight can sit in c5 forever. or maybe play b6 and put a stop to those pawns. And you don't even need to do that. The knight just sits in c5 forever, and these pieces are just amazing. So bishop g7, rook fe1. Yeah, well, I mean, white needs a plan, obviously, and maybe moving the queen back here and then going f4, f5 would be the way to play. But then you'd probably want to leave this rook here. Maybe a move like rook here would be the way to play. Rook there, and then retreat the queen out of the way, or chuck the queen here or something, and then go f4, f5, and try and develop an attack of some sort. If playing passively when you're a piece down doesn't really work. Rook fe1 is kind of a normal move of trying to play in the center, but there's no way on earth you're ever getting this push in, not with your opponent having an extra piece and guarding e5 of everything. So knight e5 was played, the queen went to d3. Okay, he's gone and traded the knight. Yeah, the more I think about it, I think trading it is not a good idea. I think sit in c5 and you sit there forever. And then just look to, just look to play on the king side with f5. Okay, yeah, 95. Okay, this at least swaps pieces off and gets black closer to an end game. a6, yeah, that's good. Queen e2, e takes b5, c takes b5. So queen e2 was actually quite clever by white, getting the queen back here so it can defend the a2 pawn. It's just a shame he's a piece down and really can't come back from here. c5, rook bd1. Okay, so white's trying to get his pieces into attacking positions. He's got f4, e5 ideas, maybe. I mean, unfortunately, this bishop's just going to sit in d4 forever. Queen a5, yeah, that's also very annoying. And a move like rook d2 can't be played because bishop c3 wins a lot of material. And rook d2 was played. No! Here instead of rook d2, yeah, I mean, this is going to fall. There's not much white can do here. f4, I think, just bang off f4 and try and come crashing through the center and just ignore these side pawns. Rook d2, he's trying to defend his pawn. Unfortunately, he just runs straight into the skewer, bang. And, well, the game was already over. Now it's even more over. a4 just loses a whole rook. You needed to defend the rook. Something like rook here needed to be played. So after bishop takes here, at least you're still defending both your pawns. You're a whole rook down, but now you're a rook and a bishop down after a4. Bishop takes d2, rook d1, bishop c3. There's really no point analyzing the rest of these moves. Once you're a rook and bishop down there, it doesn't matter how good you are. Black's going to win, even if black is a 1000 rated player and white is Magnus Carlsen. Black would still win. b6, yeah. There's not much more to this. Game over. A pretty flawless game from black there. Well done, Alex. Not much I can say. You didn't do anything wrong, really. A couple of moves there, like retreating the bishop back to g7 twice. Probably unnecessary, but psychologically, it's the safest way to play. So yeah, it's probably the right thing to do from a psychological standpoint. If they're not the best moves, they're not the best moves on the board, but you're kind of just playing safe and making sure you get the win. Okay, that's about it for this game. Yep, see you all later.